Hello, Steve.
There you go. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. Sorry about yesterday. It was crazy.
I understand.
Yeah, he got sick and he just had to stay home. So you know how it is. It's like everything kind of gets put aside.
Right. So so this is how it's gonna work. So we're gonna talk here. I'm gonna record it, if that's fine with you, and then I'm gonna post it on social media.
Yeah,
The
cool.
recording of our conversation.
Sure.
All right. So let us begin, I guess. Hello everyone. We're here on to celebrate International Women's Day. So we have a guest speaker here, Steve Bonspiel. He's a journalist, and please, I would like you to for you to have the floor and introduce yourself, if you would like to.
Sure. So my name is Steve Bonspiel. I'm actually editor publisher of the Eastern Door newspaper. I bought it in 2008, so it's been quite some time that I've been doing that, and I've been a journalist for 19 years. So mostly dealing with covering the Mohawk Nation, but for 5.5 years, the first part of my career, I was working for the Cree Nation of Northern Quebec. So have a lot of a big grounding in our Indigenous communities. Originally from Gunnesudaga, and now living in Kahnawake.
Okay. So could you explain to us what the Eastern Door is, as a media outlet, and how does it differ to other media in our contemporary society, especially in Canada?
Well, the Eastern Door was launched in 1992 after the 1990 Oka crisis. They call it Oka crisis, but people in Gunnesudaga will call it the siege of Gunnesudaga, because essentially it was the people who were peacefully protesting against the expansion of a golf course, which would have led to the destruction of our cemetery and our pine trees, for the expansion of a golf course and for condos, basically. So 1990 was a time when we realized that we needed our voices to get out there and not be covered just by the mainstream. So Kenneth Deere got together with a group of people in Kahnawake, and January 31st, the first issue of 1992, first issue of Eastern Door was launched. And how it differs, I mean, it addresses issues that essentially we're going uncovered for so long. And I think that mainstream is doing a better job now, much better job of covering our issues, but there's still a lot of gaps. There's still things that they won't cover certain things because they say, well, it's a native story, a native story, or Asian story or Black story are stories. Like, you can't look at it like and it really angers me when I hear that, because a story is a story, and you shouldn't be looking at who you're covering. For us, we specifically want to cover Indigenous issues because of how it's been underrepresented. So you're not going to see the same stories that we cover in the Gazette. You might see some, but we cover so many different ones, from the smallest to the most serious. And that's our job, is to get that out there, get those stories out there, get people to understand them, and also hopefully to get the mainstream media to be more and more interested, where they're just regularly covering us and not having to think about it as a native story.
And what drove you to become a journalist? When did it start? When did it start, and what made you want to become a journalist?
I think as an Indigenous person, you're born already with a set of certain things, and that starts with politics. You're political right from the get-go. You are controversial right from the get-go, because people don't want you to have certain rights. They don't want you to even be here in your own homeland. They don't want to deal with you. And then now you kind of have the swing where people are saying we want to learn more about Indigenous issues and whatever else. So along with that, you're a storyteller, because you're explaining what happens in your communities. You're trying to educate the people, And what better way to tell stories than by being a journalist, you know? Of course, there's other ways too. Being filmmakers, we have a lot of filmmakers. It's about getting that message out, and we want to do it from our own point of view. So I think without knowing it, I was interested in that type of outreach to the community from early on. And it was in high school where I started really realizing that I like to write. It was mostly about sports, but I really like journalism. But I also like telling our stories. So fast forward to 2003 when I started my career with the Crees with the Nation magazine, and I realized that not only could I write pretty well, but I could also adjust and get better at writing pretty quickly because I was open to criticisms, and I wanted to get the truth across. I wanted people to learn. So it wasn't long before I realized that yes, this is something I want to do as a career, because I saw that it was effective. You know, it was not only teaching non-native people about our communities. It was showing people in our communities what is important to know, what is important to express, and that's good and bad. Like it's not just about the sports star who won gold. Great, that's an amazing story. But what about the person who went to court for a serious charge, or that land claim issue that's been going on with the government? All these serious things that we're trying to tackle week to week. And even today, I mean, it's been 19 years in the business, and I'm just excited every day that I wake up because I want to tell those stories. I want to learn more about our stories. I want to share those things. I want to make our communities and the world better by sharing that knowledge, and telling people that not only are we still here, and we went through a whole lot of horrible things, colonialism, genocide, assimilation, but we keep pushing forward, and we do it in a positive way, and we want people to understand our realities, and we want people to support that, because once they know us, once they know what we stand for, once they know why we are the way we are, they really, really understand that we have no choice. I mean, we went from having a huge land base to little reserves that we live on. So we're fighting every day for our rights. We're fighting every day for the truth and the knowledge to get out there, and that's what really interests me. Like, that's what wakes me up in the morning. It drives me right through the whole day, and I dream about it.
I have because your choice is very unique, right? The fact that you chose to focus your energy and time on local newspaper and Kanawake instead of joining big national scale media. Like, why did you choose that, and why do you think that contributing more in local newspapers is important?
I think it goes back to what you alluded to before about kind of the mainstream and the way the paper differs from the mainstream. I don't think I'd have as much, I guess, leeway and freedom to kind of tell the stories I do now. Like, I get to choose the stories. Even if I was with CBC Indigenous or CTV or whatever, like, I think there's a certain amount of red tape that's there. There's a certain amount of things that you have to concentrate on that's not your community. So I wanted to be able to do it from the inside, and support our people as a community newspaper. And I think a lot of people have asked me that. Well, why didn't you just go work for the Gazette? Why don't you just? I don't see it having the same effect, And although I like politics, I wouldn't want to get pigeonholed in, let's say, covering municipal politics or doing this story or that story about Montreal. Like, interesting, but who's going to tell the other stories from our community, and from our point of view? So the big problem too that has happened is we have a shortage of Indigenous journalists. So even to find people to work for the Eastern Door has been difficult. You're dealing with not only untrained individuals who don't want to be journalists or who are maybe don't succeed as journalists, but you're also dealing with obviously our budget is a lot smaller than CTV or CBC, so we can't afford to pay people the way they do. So there's a lot of issues that are inherent there. And I think for me to be most effective is where I am now.
Right. Let's move on to another topic that we're going to talk about, which is residential schools. It's become a big news, especially last year. I've always wondered why the international community, especially us as Indonesians, we're living here, we're studying here, the fact that we live here and we study here, but we hear so little about Indigenous communities. And a lot of us don't even know like how many Indigenous communities exist around Montreal, around Quebec, and what their names are and what their significance are. And could you tell us like the background of what the general background of what residential schools are and how it has impacted Canadian lives so far?
I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. I said the best way for non-native people to understand our realities is to make it really simple, to say non-native people, usually white people in this area, have a built-up generational wealth. Okay, so if they came here and were given land for free by the government and told to develop it, and they paid their taxes, but they, were able to pass it down to their grandkids and keep going like that for generations, they've built it up. We never had that chance. So when they get to now 2022, and let's say they own properties or they're rich or whatever it is, they're successful. Well, that was because of they were living on native land and they were able to get all this help from the government. So they built up a generational wealth. For us, it's intergenerational trauma. At every turn, we weren't encouraged to, build houses and to build wealth like that. We were pushed onto little reserves and we were told, you're only an Indian when you're on the reserve. You get off the reserve and you're a savage. So right away, and this is going back, obviously hundreds of years, we were typecast, and we were they tried to assimilate us into as regular Canadians. As Mohawks, we don't believe we're Canadian. We're not Canadian. We're Mohawks first and foremost. That existed way before Canada. So for us, that's not a bad thing. Like if anybody says, well, why don't you consider yourself Canadians? Because Canada didn't exist. We've been here way before Canada, so it doesn't make sense. Why would we call ourselves something new? For residential schools, it's all part of that intergenerational trauma of taking our kids away, beating our kids, abusing our kids, and in worst case scenarios, killing our kids, or at least neglecting them enough where they died. We see now that they estimate, they haven't even looked at all the residential schools. They estimate there's over 10,000 graves right now. Just right, like imagine how many they're going to find. So residential schools was part of that, but also every turn they control us. And I'll give you another example. In our community, we built our house here. If we go to sell our house, we can only sell it to a handful of people who are from the community for a much reduced price from, let's say, neighboring community of Chateauguay. If the same people, if a couple in the same situation build a house, same house out there, automatically worth more, they can sell it to millions of people, and that's how you continue to build up wealth. So even now, even without having that generational wealth, our hands are tied by not being able to build up wealth for ourselves in the present. So that's under the Indian Act. Under the Indian Act, we do not even own our own land here. It is Crown land. So there's all these things that we have to deconstruct, and it's a lot to take in. But residential schools really played a big part at destroying that identity, of stopping the kids and who became our elders from speaking the language, from passing it down, from loving. If you don't hug a kid for their whole life, they're not going to know how to hug. They're not going to know how to love. They're not going to know how to show you, teach you how to love. So a lot of that stuff we're still trying to find ways to get around. But how do you do that? When generation upon generation has dealt with this, how do you reverse that? It's been very difficult.
Talking about this, I remember I'm still in college, and once I joined this indigenous, there's this indigenous woman who was in residential school, and then she was a survivor. She talked at the college, and she talked about her story. And I was left speechless by her experiences. It was just it's something I can't comprehend. If like she never met her family for decades, and it made her very awkward with her family herself. Like it's um like how like this a problem as immense as this. Who do you think was responsible, and what do you think the government is lacking in terms of helping, in terms of giving the what are they lacking in communicating with indigenous communities?
Well, I think that the responsibility lies with the government and lies with the churches, and as the overseers of all this, but also individuals, priests and nuns and clergy who perpetuated this, who abused the kids, who were pedophiles, who were protected at every turn. I mean, if I send you away to school at 5 years old and you come back at 16, what's going to happen? And you never come back before that. Like 11 years, you're gone. I have stories of, residential school survivors who say they came back and they didn't even recognize their mother, because they hadn't seen them like their whole childhood. They didn't even know who their mother or father was. That's horrible, and there's of course many horrible stories that I wouldn't even share now. They're so terrible. But I'll tell you is a residential school survivor was telling me one day that they were feeling ill at residential school and they threw up, and the nun made them eat the throw up before they finished their food. Like who does this to a child? And this is what people need to understand. This is not normal. Should never be supported. The government today, what do they do to make it right? Well, you know what? They should be putting more money into supporting our languages. They try to destroy our languages. So why is there not anybody who wants to study Mohawk should be able to do it and be paid for it as a full-time job? And because otherwise, like, how do you reverse that? And that's just one little thing. But how do you reverse the damage that residential school did? Psychologically, it's going to be very difficult, but you can start to make good by supporting the programs that exist that are trying to get back what was stolen from us.
Okay. I want to move on to another topic, which is the role of women in your communities. Which one of the topic that you want to talk about, since it's International Women's Day? And I have one question, and then you can talk about how women play a role in your community. What do women mean in indigenous communities like Kanawaki, for example, like for the Mohawks?
So this is a positive story and it's a sad story. Traditionally, women were our leaders. Okay, so back when we would fight wars, whether it's with other indigenous nations or French people or English, if you killed a chief, you weren't killing the leader. The white people would think, oh, it's the man. He's the leading. So let's go after him. That's their general. No, the chief could die, and that would be what it would be, and it would end there, because the clan mothers were the ones who led, who were choosing the chiefs, who were running the village, who were the ones that we look to for leadership, the real leadership. So our women we're matrilineal society. Our clans are passed down through our mothers. Our women are our power. They're the givers of life. They are the ones who, I mean, if you can't, to me personally, if you can't respect a woman, there's something wrong with you. But what happened with colonialism is they taught us that, you guys are a matrilineal society. It's wrong. We're a patrilineal society. We follow, the father is the head of the household. The father carries the name. So we want you to change your society to ours. And there's a big conflict there, So in this day and age, as Mohawks, we're supposed to say, we love and respect women, but there's a lot of people who lost their way, because they're caught between what the government was trying to teach them, trying to force them to do and change, and to what we were traditionally. So it's sad to see that the way our women are treated now is not always the best. It's not as respectful. It's not that we've kind of lost our way in that way, where we don't put them on a pedestal anymore. There's so many reasons for that. I don't blame us as a society in the way we shifted, because we were forced to oftentimes. But I do believe individually that we can change that way of looking at things, and it starts with respect. It starts with respecting yourself and respecting women. And there's a lot of people in our town who do, of course, but there's definitely some people who've lost their way.
Right. In relation to this, in relation to Mohawk's point of view of women, towards women, and how does feminism apply to Kahnawake women? Because we know that there are nuances in terms of how we view feminism, and is feminism even relevant to the Mohawk community? Because feminism oftentimes it's driven from it was born in Europe, and it was basically, and how does it differ to Kahnawake women?
Well, see, feminism and feminists had to do something, right? They had to come out in this way to fight for their own rights, because in regular society, European, North American women were not looked at as people. They were looked at as like almost possessions. That didn't have to happen in our communities, because it wasn't like that. It was always, women were always respected. And that's where you get the issue of the mixing of kind of the two societies. And so I think that the fact that women weren't allowed to vote for the longest time, and they had to fight for the suffrage, the suffrage movement, shows you that there was a lot of work to do in what was supposedly a civilized society, a mainstream society, where we already had it. We already had a system, a clan system, clan mothers. We already had things worked out in our Great Law of Peace, and it was driven by the women. It started with the women. So there was no question of, there didn't have to be a movement
Right.
for that equality. It already existed. And I think that, getting back to the way it was, I think would do this community a lot of good. Right now we have a female Grand Chief. If you look at in Indigenous society overall, you have a female Indigenous Governor General, an Assembly of First Nations leader is female. You're seeing people like that movement that's happening, that has to happen, that should have happened a long time ago. It shouldn't be you're electing a woman or a man. It should be you're electing the best person for the job, and women should have an equal shot at that. So, and just to let you know now, we have a question here. Do you want me to answer it?
Yep. I'll actually let the person talk, and then ask you directly.
Okay. Oh, it says their microphone's not working.
Oh, okay. 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 Yeah, you can answer the question. So let me read the question first. So the question is, how do you see Canadian media portray or report Indigenous issues now? To what extent there's bias on reporting the issue?
I think mainstream media, if you look back at 1990, when, the police were sent in shooting at women and children, tear gassing, and then the army was sent in to control the Mohawks, even though we weren't the ones that were, we didn't start that fight. We just stood up for our ground, stood our ground and stood up for our communities. A lot has changed since then. There's more understanding, there's more education, but they're still not doing the best job, because they're not putting Indigenous stories as, they're not giving equal weight to Indigenous stories. And I think that's a mistake. I mean, I teach Indigenous journalism, Concordia, and I teach later on today, and I always tell them, look, you can't really be a balanced journalist unless you know about our communities. Like this is our homeland. This is where we're from. Like we can't go back to Europe. We can't go anywhere else. This is our land. So why anybody who's is out there reporting on all these things across the world, or even just in Canada, you need to know what's going on with our communities. Like you need to understand that history. You need to understand how this country was formed and born, on our land. So yes, they could definitely do a better job. I think their bias exists in not knowing. It's an ignorance bias. It's thinking they know, or it's kind of like maybe doing research for a bit and then not taking the time to really learn the issues. And I always call it drive-through journalism. Like, okay, you're going through, you get your story, now you go, you got your Big Mac, go eat it in the corner and you're done. You never go back there. Like you have to spend the time to learn about it. And I think there's more journalists now who care, who want to, and who are learning, but we still have a long way to go. I mean, there's still, if you ask a lot of the big mainstream journalists out there anything about our communities, and it's appalling how little they know.
We're almost at the end of our meeting, and I have a couple of final questions for you. What does it mean to be Indigenous, to be Kanawakin, to be a Moha?
Well, I think it means, like I said, you're born automatically with certain things on your back, on your shoulders. Like you carry that your whole life. I mean, you're proud of who you are. You will fight as hard as you can for your family and your community and whatever else, but automatically you're looked at by society as different, as less. I didn't get the same opportunities as a non-native would, with a similar upbringing and education, because nothing's expected of you. You're expected to be drunk, a bum, no education. You're expected not to do anything. So if those are your expectations, what do you think is going to happen? People turn to drugs and alcohol as a way to deal with the pain. But I think more and more people are getting educated. More and more issues are coming out. We're learning about things. We don't only know about our culture and languages more and more, but we know about the outside. We know about how non-natives, deal with us. We know the education system. So we're getting more and more educated in the quote unquote mainstream to go along with our traditional knowledge. And I think there's a lot of power in there. And I think when the government sees that, I think they kind of get scared, because gone are the days of controlling us in our communities, of having an Indian agent here who had to, say yes or no on even letting you leave the community. If you were drinking, just had a drink at your house and you were walking outside, they could arrest you just for being what they call drunk and disorderly. There was so many arbitrary things that they would apply to our people. And we're just coming out of those things. We're just coming out of trying to stretch our arms and legs and flex our wings and be who we are. But there's still a lot of that trauma that's on our backs. There's still a lot of the issues that we have never been resolved. Why are there still active land claims? Like, why are we living on such a small piece of land when all this land was ours? It makes no sense. So there's a lot of things that have to change. And I'm never going to stop fighting for it. I'm never going to stop writing about it, not only as a reporter but as an editorialist. And I'm trying to make things change from within, but also people out there, like whoever's reading me, whoever listens to me, whoever takes my class. Like, we have to change things. We can't continue on this path.
Do you have any final message, especially for us, for people who study here from abroad, for Indonesians in Indonesia, about Indigenous communities? Because I find it very resonating. I find it very reflecting, very relatable. Seeing how the situation is in Indonesia, we have a lot of Indigenous groups too. whose communities are abused, whose communities are threatened by government expansion, for example, and a development, quote unquote. And yeah, do you have any final message for us?
Well, I think 2022. It's not 1922. It's time for. We have the internet. We have so many ways to learn about Indigenous issues, and no matter who it is, whether it's Indonesians or from anywhere in this world, it's on you, if you come to this country, or even if you don't come to this country, to learn about the Indigenous issues of the world, because there's Indigenous people in every single country, and they've either been eradicated or they've been controlled, or it's very rare that they have anywhere close to, they never get an equal share, but it's anywhere close to a share, a voice in their own communities, in their own countries. So I really would encourage you to learn about Mohawks, learn about the 11 nations that are here in Quebec, learn about the history, about the Mohawks fighting on the side of the British and actually helping to win Canada, beat the Americans, and even fighting and beating the French. And there's a lot of things that if people knew about it, they'd be more educated and more understanding. And that's what we have to eliminate. It's too easy to be racist. It's too easy to say, oh, you're this, so I don't know about you, I don't like you. That's easy. That's ignorance. But what about the hard work of getting to know somebody, getting to know a community, and understanding their struggles and why they do what they do? I think that falls on everybody, and that you guys are in there too. Like, you have to go from here and listen to what I said today, but also do your own research. Come to the communities. If you have people at the school who are Indigenous, talk to them about things, but don't only rely on their knowledge, or if you have a question, just go ask the same person. It's up to you too to learn in different ways, and there's so many ways to do that in this day and age.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you keep on writing, keep on fighting for your community, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
All right, take care. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.